If you're a maintenance supervisor for a commercial property, you've had to deal with everything from leaky faucets to flickering light bulbs. But nothing's worse than that ancient boiler that's lived in the building since the day it was built, 50 years ago. It's enough to make anyone lose their cool. That's where Grainger comes in. With industrial-grade products and dependable fast delivery, Grainger can help with any challenge, from worn-out components to everyday necessities. Call, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
Welcome, crew. Excuse me, guys, gals, ghouls, friends, fiends, foes, whoever may be listening, Beyond The Omniverse tonight. Secure your tinfoil hats, buckle down tight, and hold on loosely as we soar over the rocky tops of the La Platas on a rocky mountain high, get sucked into the vortex of the Four Corners, and settle down snugly at mile marker 420 in colorful Colorado. It is Sunday, December 8th, Monday, December 9th for those of you across the pond and beyond. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to you, and welcome to We Are Paradox Media's Late Night in the Rockies. I'm your host, TessaTNT, and we are broadcasting live from the Mile High Clubhouse tonight. So tonight we have story time with me, TessaTNT, and we will be reading once more from Stephen King's book, Insomnia. Carolyn carked suddenly in the same instant that he knew the dream was over. Ralph was falling. He barely registered the fact before he thumped to the bedroom floor. He managed to break his fall with one outstretched hand, probably saving himself a nasty rap on the head, but provoking a howl of pain from beneath the butterfly bandage taped high up on his left side. For the moment at least, he barely registered the pain. What he felt was fear, revulsion, a horrible aching grief, and most of all, an overwhelming sense of gratitude. The bad dream, surely the worst dream he'd ever had, was over, and he was in the world of real things again. He pulled back his mostly unbuttoned pajama top, checked the bandage for bleeding, saw none, and then sat up. Just doing that much seemed to exhaust him. The thought of getting up, even long enough to fall back into bed, seemed out of the question for the time being. Maybe after his panicky racing heart slowed down a little. Can people die of a bad dream, he wondered. And in answer, he heard Joe Weiser's voice. You bet they can, Ralph, although the medical examiner usually ends up writing suicide on the cause of death line. In the shaky aftermath of his nightmares, sitting on the floor and hugging his knees with his right arm, Ralph had no real doubt that some dreams were powerful enough to kill. The details of this one were fading out now, but he could still remember the climax all too well. That thudding sound like a hammer hitting a thick cut of beef, and the vile spew of bugs from Carolyn's head. Plump they had been, plump and lively, and why not? They had been feasting on his dead wife's brain. Ralph uttered a low, watery moan and swiped at his face with his left hand, provoking another jolt from beneath the bandage. His palm came away slick with sweat. What exactly had she been telling him to watch out for? White man traps? No, tracks, not traps. White man tracks, whatever they were. Had there been more? Maybe, maybe not. He couldn't remember for sure, and so what? It had been a dream, for Christ's sake, just a dream. And outside of the fantasy world described in the tabloid newspapers, dreams meant nothing and proved nothing. When a person went to sleep, his mind seemed to turn into a kind of rat house bargain hunter, sifting through the discount bins of mostly worthless short-term memories, looking not for items which were valuable or even useful, but only for things that were still bright and shining. Things it put together in freak show collages, which were often striking but had, for the most part, all the sense of Natalie Dipnew's conversation. Rosalie the dog had turned up. Even Bill's missing Panama hat had made a cameo appearance, but it all meant nothing. Except, tomorrow night, he would not take one of the pain pills the MT had given him, even if his arm felt like it was falling off. Not only had the one he'd taken during the late news failed to keep him under, as he hoped and half expected, it had probably played its own part in causing the nightmare. Ralph managed to get up off the floor and sit on the edge of the bed. A wave of faintness floated through his head like a parachute, and he shut his eyes until the feeling passed. While he was sitting there with his head down and his eyes closed, he groped for the lamp on the bedside table and turned it on. When he opened his eyes, the area of the bedroom, lit by its warm yellow glow, looked very bright and very real. He looked at the clock beside the lamp, 1:48 a.m., and he felt totally awake and totally alert, pain pill or no pain pill. He got up, walked slowly into the kitchen, and put on the tea kettle. Then he leaned against the corner, absently massaging the bandage underneath his left armpit. Trying to quiet the throbbing, his most recent adventures had awakened there. When the kettle steamed, he poured hot water over a bag of Sleepy Time. There was a joke for you, and then took the cup into the living room. He plopped into the wing-back chair without bothering to turn on a light. The street lamps and the dim glow coming from the bedroom provided all he needed. Well, he thought, here I am again, front row center. Let the play begin. Time passed, just how much he could not have said. But throbbing beneath his arm had eased, and the tea had gone from hot to barely lukewarm when he registered movement out of the corner of his eye. Ralph turned his head, expecting to see Rosalie, but it wasn't Rosalie. It was two men stepping out onto the stoop of a house on the other side of Harris Avenue. Ralph couldn't make out the colors of the house. The orange arc sodiums the city had installed several. Come on, Paige. Several years ago provided great visibility, but made any perception of true colors mostly impossible. Yet he could see that the color of the trim was radically different from the color of the rest. That, coupled with its location, made Ralph almost positive it was May Locare's house. The two men on May Locare's stoop were very short, probably no more than 4 feet tall. They appeared to be surrounded by greenish auras. They were dressed in identical white smocks, which looked to Ralph like the ones worn by actors in those old TV doc operas. Black and white melodramas like Ben Casey and Dr. Kildare. One of them had something in his hand. Ralph squinted. He couldn't make it out, but it had a sharp and hungry look. He could not have sworn under oath that it was a knife, but he thought it might be. Yes, it might very well be a knife. His first clear evaluative thought about this experience was that the men over there looked like aliens in a movie about UFO abductions. Communion, perhaps, or fire in the sky. His second was that he had fallen asleep again, right here in his wing chair without even noticing. That's right, Ralph. It's just a little more rummage sale action, probably brought on by the stress of being stabbed and helped along by that friggin' pain pill. He sensed nothing frightening about the two figures on May Loker's stoop, other than the long, sharp-looking thing one of them was holding. Ralph supposed that not even your dreaming mind could do much with a couple of short, bald guys wearing white tunics, which looked left over from the central casting. Also, there was nothing frightening about their behavior, nothing furtive, nothing menacing. They stood on the stoop as if they had every right to be there in the darkest, stillest hour of the morning. They are facing each other, the attitudes of their bodies and large bald heads suggesting two old friends having a sober, civilized conversation. They look thoughtful and intelligent, the kind of space travelers who would be more apt to say, "We come in peace," than kidnap you, stick a probe up your ass, and then take notes on your reaction. Alright, so maybe this new dream's not an out-and-out nightmare? After the last one, are you complaining? No, of course he wasn't. Winding up on the floor once a night was plenty, thanks. Yet there was something very disquieting about this dream, just the same. It felt real in a way that his dream of Carolyn had not. This was his own living room, after all, not some weird deserted beach he had never seen before. He was sitting in the same wingback chair, where he sat every morning holding a cup of tea, which was now almost cold in his left hand. And when he raised the fingers of his right hand to his nose, as he was doing now, he could still smell a faint whiff of soap beneath the nails, the Irish Spring he liked to use in the shower. Ralph suddenly reached beneath his left armpit and pressed his fingers to the bandage there. The pain was immediate and intense. But the two bald men in the white tunics stayed right where they were, on May Loker's doorstep. Doesn't matter what you think you feel, Ralph. It can't matter because... Fuck you, Ralph said in a hoarse, low voice. He rose from the wing chair, putting his cup down on the little table beside it, as he did. Sleepy Time slopped onto the TV guide there. Fuck you, this is no dream. He hurried across the living room to the kitchen, pajamas flapping, old worn slippers scuffing and thumping, the place where Charlie Pickering had stuck him, sending out hot little bursts of pain. He grabbed a chair and took it into the apartment's small foyer. There was a closet here. Ralph opened its door, snapped on the light just inside, positioned the chair so he would be able to reach the closet's top shelf, and then stood on it. The shelf was a clutter of lost or forgotten items, most of which had belonged to Carolyn. These were small things, little more than scraps, but looking at them drove away the last lingering conviction that this had to be a dream. There was an ancient bag of M&Ms, her secret snack food, her comfort food. There was a lace heart, a single discarded white satin pump with a broken heel, a photo album. These things hurt a lot more than the knife prick under his arm, but he had no time to hurt just now. Ralph leaned forward, placing his left hand on the high, dusty shelf to balance his weight, then began to shuffle through the junk with his right hand, all the while praying that the kitchen chair wouldn't take a notion to scoot out from under him. The wound below his armpit was now throbbing outrageously, and he knew he was going to get it bleeding again if he didn't stop the athletics soon, but... Sure, they're up here somewhere. Well, almost sure. He pushed aside his old fly box and his wicker creel. There was a stack of magazines behind the creel. The one on top was an issue of Look, with Andy Williams on the cover. Ralph shoved them aside with the heel of his hand, sending up a flurry of dust. The old bag of M&Ms fell to the floor and split open, spraying brightly colored bits of candy in every direction. Ralph leaned even farther forward, now almost on his toes. He supposed it was his imagination, but he thought he could sense the kitchen chair he was on getting ready to be evil. The thought had no more crossed his mind when the chair squawked and began to slide slowly backward on the hardwood floor. Ralph ignored that, ignored his throbbing side, and ignored the voice telling him he ought to stop this. He really ought to, because he was dreaming awake, just as the hall book said many insomniacs eventually did. And although those little fellows across the street didn't really exist, He could really be standing here on the slowly sliding chair, and he could really break his hip when it came out from under him. And just how the hell was he going to explain what had happened when some smart-ass doctor in the emergency room of Derry Home asked him? Grunting, he reached all the way back, pushed aside a carton from which half a Christmas tree star protruded like a strange, spiky periscope, knocking the heelless evening pump on the floor in the process, and saw what he wanted in the far left-hand corner of the shelf. The case which contained his old Zeiss Icon binoculars. Ralph stepped off the chair just before it could slide all the way out from under him, moved it closer in, then got it up again. He couldn't reach all the way into the corner where the binocular case stood, so he grabbed the trout net, which had been laying up there next to his krill and fly box for these many years, and succeeded in bagging the case in his second try. He dragged it forward until he could grab and strap, stepped off the chair, and came down on the fallen evening pump. His ankle twisted painfully. Ralph staggered, flailed his arms for balance, and managed to avoid going face first into the wall. As he started back into the living room, however, he felt liquid warmth beneath the bandage on his side. He had managed to open the knife wound again after all. Wonderful, just wonderful nice shave, Robert. And how long had he been away from the window? He didn't know, but it felt like a long time, and he was sure the little bald doctors would be gone when he got back there. The street would be empty, and... He stopped dead, the binocular case dangling at the end of its strap and tracking a long, slow, trapezoidal shadow back and forth across the floor, where the orange glow of the streetlights lay like an ugly coat of paint. Little bald doctors. Was that how he had just thought of them? Yes, of course, because that was what they called them, the folks who claimed to have been abducted by them, examined by them, operated on by them in some cases. They were physicians from space, proctologists from the great beyond. But that wasn't the big deal. The big deal was... Ed used the phrase, Ralph thought. He used it the night he called me and warned me to stay away from him and his interest. He said it was the doctor who told him about the Crimson King, and the Centurions and all the rest. Yes, Ralph whispered. His back was prickling madly with goose flesh. Yes, that's what he said. The doctor told me, the little bald doctor. When he reached the window, he saw the strangers were still out there, although they had moved from Mayloker's stoop to the sidewalk while he had been fishing for the binoculars. They were standing directly beneath one of those damned orange streetlights, in fact. Ralph's feeling that Harris Avenue looked like a deserted stage set after the evening performance returned with weird, declamatory force. But with a different significance. For one thing, the set was no longer deserted, was it? Some ominous long-past midnight play had commenced in what the two odd creatures below no doubt assumed was a totally empty theater. What would they do if they knew who had an audience? Ralph wondered. What would they do to me? The bald doctors now had the shared demeanor of men who have nearly reached agreement. In that instant they did not look like doctors at all to Ralph. In spite of their smocks, they looked like blue-collar workers coming off shift at some plant or factory. These two guys, clearly buddies, have stopped outside the main gate for a moment or two to finish off some subject, but can't wait even long enough for them to walk down the block to the nearest bar, knowing it will only take a minute or so in any case. Total agreement is only a conversational exchange or two away. Ralph uncased the binoculars, raised them to his eyes, and wasted a moment or two in puzzled fiddling with the focus knob before realizing he had forgotten to take off the lens cap. He did so, then raised the glasses again. This time the two figures standing under the street lamp jumped into his field of vision at once, large and perfectly lit, but fuzzed out. He turned the little knob between the barrels again, and the two men popped into focus almost immediately. Ralph's breath stopped in his throat. The look he got was extremely brief. No more than 3 seconds passed before one of the men, if they were men, nodded and clapped a hand on his companion's shoulder. Then they both turned away, leaving Ralph with nothing to look at but their bald heads and smooth, white-clad backs. Only 3 seconds at most, but Ralph saw enough in that brief space of time to make him profoundly uneasy. He had run to get the binoculars for 2 reasons, both predicated on his inability to go on believing that this was a dream. First, he wanted to be sure he could identify the 2 men if he was ever called upon to do so. Second, this one was less admissible to his conscious mind, but every bit as urgent. He had wanted to dispel the unsettling notion that he was having his own close encounter of the 3rd kind. Instead of dispelling it, his brief look through the binoculars intensified it. The little bald doctor's eyes, noses, mouths, but they seemed as interchangeable as the chrome trim on the same make and model of a car. They could have been identical twins, but that wasn't the impression Ralph got either. To him, they looked more like department store mannequins with their Arnold wigs whisked off for the night. Their eerie resemblance not the result of genetics but of mass production. The only peculiar quality he could isolate and name was the preternaturally smooth quality of their skin. Neither of them had so much as a single visible line or wrinkle. No moles, blotches, or scars either, although Ralph supposed those were things he might miss if even a great pair of binoculars. Beyond the smooth and strangely line-free quality of their skin, everything became subjective, and his only look had been so goddamn brief. If he had been able to get the binoculars more quickly without the rigmarole of the chair and the fishing net, and if he had realized that the lens caps were on right away instead of wasting more time fiddling with the focusing knob, he might have saved himself some or all the unease he was now feeling. They look sketched, he thought in the instant before they turned their backs on him. That's what's really bothering me, I think. No, the identical bald heads, the identical white smocks, or even the lack of wrinkles. It's how they look sketched, the eyes just circles, the small pink ears just squiggles made with a felt-tip pen, the mouth a pair of quick, almost careless strokes of pale pink watercolor. They don't really look like either people or aliens. They look like hasty representations of I don't know what. He was sure of one thing. Docs number 1 and 2 were both immersed in bright auras, which in the binoculars appeared to be green gold, and filled with deep reddish-orange flecks that looked like sparks swirling up from a campfire. These auras conveyed a feeling of power and vitality to Ralph that their featureless, uninteresting faces did not. The faces, I'm not sure I could pick them out again, even if someone held a gun to my head. It's as if they were made to be forgotten. If they were still bald, sure, no problem, but if they were wearing wigs and maybe sitting down, so I couldn't see how short they are, maybe. The lack of lines might do the trick, but then again, maybe not. The auras, though, those green gold auras with the red flecks swirling through them. I'd know them anywhere, but there's something wrong with them, isn't there? What is it? The answer popped into Ralph's mind as suddenly and easily as the 2 creatures had popped into view when he had finally remembered to remove the lens caps of the binoculars. Both of the little doctors were swaddled in brilliant auras, but neither had a balloon string floating up from their hairless head. Not even a sign of one. They went strolling down Harris Avenue in the direction of Strawford Park, moving with ease of 2 friends out for a Sunday stroll. Just before they left the bright circle of light thrown by the street lamp in front of May Loker's house, Ralph dropped the angle of the binoculars so they picked up the item in Doc number 1's right hand. It wasn't a knife, as he had surmised, but it still wasn't the sort of object you felt comfortable seeing in the hand of a departing stranger in the wee hours of the morning. It was a pair of long-bladed stainless steel scissors. Section 4. That sense of being pushed relentlessly toward the mouth of a tunnel, where all sorts of unpleasant things were waiting, was with him again. Only now it was accompanied by a feeling of panic, because it seemed that the latest big shove had taken place while he had been asleep and dreaming of his dead wife. Something inside him wanted to shriek with terror, and Ralph understood that if he didn't do something to soothe it immediately, he would soon be shrieking out loud. He closed his eyes and began to take deep breaths, trying to picture a different item of food with each one. a tomato, a potato, an ice cream sandwich, a Brussels sprout. Dr. Jamal had taught Carolyn the simple relaxation technique, and it had frequently staved off her headaches before they could get up a full head of steam. Even in the last 6 weeks, when the tumor had been out of control, the technique had sometimes worked, and it controlled Ralph's panic now. His heartbeat began to slow, and that feeling that he needed to scream began to pass. Continuing to take deep breaths and to think apple, pear, slice of lemon pie. Of food, Ralph carefully snapped the lens caps back on the binoculars. His hands were still trembling, but not so badly he couldn't use them. Once the binoculars were capped and returned to their case, Ralph gingerly raised his left arm and looked at the bandage. There was a red spot in the center of it the size of an aspirin tablet, but it did not appear to be spreading. Good. There isn't anything good about this, Ralph. Fair enough, but that wasn't going to help him decide exactly what had happened, or what he was going to do about it. Step 1 was to push his dreadful dream of Carolyn to one side for the time being, and decide what had actually happened. "I've been awake ever since I hit the floor," Ralph told the empty room. "I know that, and I know I saw those men." Yes, he had really seen them, and the green-gold auras around them. He wasn't alone either. Ed Dipnew had seen at least one of them, too. Ralph would have bet the farm on it, if he'd had a farm to bet. It didn't ease his mind much, however, to know that he and the wife, being paranoid from up the street, were seeing the same little bald guys. And the auras, Ralph. Didn't he say something about those too? Well, he hadn't used the exact word, but Ralph was quite sure he had spoken of the auras at least twice. Just the same. Ralph, sometimes the world is full of colors. That had been August, shortly before John Lydecker had arrested Ed on the charge of domestic abuse, a misdemeanor. Then almost a month later, when he had called Ralph on the phone, "Are you seeing the colors yet?" First the colors, now the little bald doctors. Surely the Crimson King himself would be along any time, and all that aside, what was he supposed to do about what he had just seen? The answer came in an unexpected but welcome burst of clarity. The issue he saw was not his own sanity, not the auras, not the little bald doctors, but May Lokier. He had just seen 2 strangers step out of Mrs. Loker's house in the dead of night, and one of them had been carrying a potentially lethal weapon. Ralph reached past the base binoculars, took the telephone, and dialed 911. "This is Officer Hangin," a woman's voice. "How may I help you?" "By listening carefully and acting fast," Ralph said crisply. The look of dazed indecision which he had worn so frequently since midsummer was gone now. Sitting erect in the wing-back chair, with the phone in his lap, he looked not 70, but healthy and capable 55. "You may be able to save a woman's life." "Sir, would you please give me your name, and don't interrupt me, please, Officer Hangin," said the man, who could no longer remember the last 4 digits of the Dairy Cinema Center. "I woke up a short time ago, couldn't go back to sleep, and decided to sit up for a while. My living room looks out on Upper Harris Avenue. I just saw—" Here Ralph paused for the barest moment, thinking not about what he had seen, but what he wanted to tell Officer Hangin he had seen. The answer came as quickly and effortlessly as the decision to call 911 in the first place. "I saw 2 men coming out of a house up the street from the Red Apple store. The house belongs to a woman named May Locher. That's Locher. First letter L, as in Lexington. Mrs. Locher is severely ill. I've never seen these 2 men before." He paused again, but this time consciously, wanting to achieve maximum effect. One of them had a pair of scissors in his hand. "Site address?" Officer Hangin asked. She was calm enough, but Ralph sensed he had turned on a lot of her lights. "I don't know," he said. "Get out of the phone book, Officer Hangin, or just tell the responding officers to look for the yellow house with the pink trim half a block or so up from the Red Apple. They'll probably have to use a flashlight to pick it out because of the damned orange streetlights, but they'll find it." "Yes, sir, I'm sure they will, but I still need your name and telephone number for our Rick." Ralph replaced a phone gently in its cradle. He sat looking at it for almost a full minute, expecting it to ring. When it didn't, he decided to either they didn't have the fancy trace-back equipment he saw on the TV true crime shows, or it hadn't been turned on. That was good. It didn't solve the problem of what he was going to do or say, or if they hauled May Locher out of her hideous yellow and pink house in pieces. but it did buy a little more thinking time. Below, Harris Avenue remained silent and still, lit only by the high-intensity lamps which marched off in both directions, like some surrealist dream of perspective. The play, short but full of drama, appeared to be over. The stage was empty again. No, not quite empty after all. Rosalie came limping out of the alley between the Red Apple and the True Value Hardware next door. The faded bandana flapped around her neck. This wasn't a Thursday. There were no garbage cans set out for Rosalie to investigate, and she moved briskly up the sidewalk until she got to May Loker's house. There she stopped and lowered her nose, looking at that long and rather pretty nose. Ralph had thought on occasion that there must be a collie somewhere in Rosalie's woodpile. Something was glimmering there, Ralph realized. He got the binoculars out of their case once more and trained them on Rosalie. As he did, he found his mind returning to September 10th again, this time to his meeting with Bill and Lois just outside the entrance of Strawford Park. He remembered how Bill put his arm around Lois's waist and led her up the street, how the two of them together had made Ralph think of Ginger Rogers and Fred Astaire. Most of all, he remembered the spectral tracks the two of them had left behind. Lois's had been gray, Bill's olive green. Hallucinations, he had thought of them at that time, back in the good old days before he'd started attracting the attention of nuts like Charlie Pickering and seeing little bald doctors in the middle of the night. Rosalie was sniffing at a similar track. It was the same green gold as the auras which had been surrounded the Bald Doctor No. 1 and Bald Doctor No. 2. Ralph panned the binoculars slowly away from the dog and saw more tracks, 2 sets of them, leading down the sidewalk in the direction of the park. They were fading. He could almost see them fading as he looked at them, but they were there. Ralph panned the binoculars back to Rosalie, suddenly feeling an enormous wave of affection for the mangy old stray. And why not? If he had needed final absolution proof that he had actually seen the things he thought he had seen, Rosalie was it. If baby Natalie was here, she'd see them too, Ralph thought. And then all his doubts tried to crowd back in. Would she? Would she really? He thought he had seen the baby grab at the faint auras left by his fingers, and he had been sure she was gawking at the spectral green smoke sizzling off the flowers in the kitchen. But now could he be sure? How could anyone be sure what a baby was looking at or reaching for? But Rosalie, look, right down there, see her? The only trouble with that, Ralph realized, was that he hadn't seen the tracks until Rosalie had begun to sniff the sidewalk. Maybe she was sniffing at the entrancing remnant of leftover postmen, and what he was seeing had been created by nothing more than his tired, sleep-starved mind, like the little bald doctors themselves. In the magnified field of binoculars, Rosalie now began to make her way down Harris Avenue with her nose to the sidewalk, and her ragged tail waving slowly back and forth. She was moving from the green-gold tracks left by Doctor No. 1 to those left by Doctor No. 2, and then back to Doc No. 1's trail again. So now why don't you tell me what that stray bitch is following, Ralph? Do you think it's possible for a dog to track a fucking hallucination? It's not a hallucination, it's tracks. Real tracks. The white man tracks that Carolyn told you to watch out for. You know that. You see that. It's crazy, though, he told himself. Crazy. But was it? Was it really? The dream might have been more than a dream. If there was such a thing as hyperreality, and he can now testify that there was, then maybe there was such a thing as precognition, too. Or ghosts which came in dreams and foretold the future. Who knew? It was as if a door in the wall of reality had come ajar, and now all sorts of unwelcome things were flying through. Of one thing he was sure, the tracks were really there. He saw them, Rosalie smelled them, and that was all there was to it. Ralph had discovered a number of strange and interesting things during his 6 months of premature waking, and one of them was that a human being's capacity for self-deception seemed to be at its lowest ebb between 3 and 6 in the morning, and it was now. Ralph leaned forward so he could see the clock in the kitchen wall. Just past 3:30, He raised the binoculars again and saw Rosalie still moving up the Bald Doc's back trail. If someone came strolling along Harris Avenue right now, unlikely given the hour, but not impossible, they would see nothing but a stray mutt with a dirty coat sniffing at the sidewalk in the aimless fashion of untrained, own dogs everywhere. But Ralph could see that Rosalie was sniffing at, and had finally given himself permission to believe his eyes. It was a permission he might revoke once the sun was up, but for now he knew exactly what he was seeing. Rosalie's head came up suddenly, her ears cocked forward. For one moment she was almost beautiful, the way a hunting dog on point is beautiful. Then, moments before the headlights of a car approached the Harris Avenue-Witcham Street intersection, splashed the street, she was gone back the way she had come, running in a corkscrewing, limping gait that made Ralph feel sorry for her. When you come right down to it, what was Rosalie but another of Harris Avenue's old crock? One that didn't even have the comfort of the occasional game of gin rummy or penny-ante poker with others of her kind. She darted back into the alley between the Red Apple and the hardware store, an instant before a Derry police cruiser turned the corner and floated slowly up the street. Its siren was off, but the revolving flashers were on. They painted the blue houses and small businesses ranged along this part of Harris Avenue with alternating pulses of red and blue light. Ralph put the binoculars back in his lap and leaned forward in the wing chair, forearms on his thighs, watching intently. His heart was beating hard enough for him to be able to feel it in his temples. The cruiser slowed to a crawl as it passed the Red Apple. The spotlight mounted on its right-hand side snapped on, and the beam began to slide across the fronts of the sleeping houses on the far side of the street. In most cases, it also slid across the street numbers mounted outside, beside the doors, or on porch columns. When it lit on the number of Mayloker's house, 86, Ralph saw, and he didn't need the binoculars to read it either. The cruiser's taillights flashed and the car came to a stop. Two uniformed policemen got out and approached the walk leading up the house. Oblivious of both the man, watching from a darkened second-floor window across the street and the fading green-gold footprints over which they were walking. They conferred, and Ralph raised the binoculars again to get a closer look. He was almost positive that the younger of the two men was the uniformed cop who had shown up with Lydecker at Ed's house on the day Ed had been arrested. Noel? Had that been his name? No, Ralph murmured. Nell, Chris Nell, or maybe it was Jess. Nell and his partner seemed to be having a serious discussion about something, much more serious than the one the little bald doctors had been having before they strolled away. This one ended with the cops drawing their sidearms and then climbing the narrow steps to Miss Loker's stoop in single file, with Nell in front. He pressed the doorbell, waiting, then pressed it again. This time he leaned on the button for a good 5 seconds. They waited a little more, and then the second cop brushed past Nell and had a go at the button himself. Maybe that one knows the secret art of doorbell ringing, Ralph thought. Probably learned it by answering a Rosicrucian's ad. If so, the technique failed him this time. There was still no response, and Ralph wasn't surprised. Strange bald men with scissors, notwithstanding, he doubted May Loker could even get out of bed. But if she's bedridden, she might have a companion, someone to get her meals, help her to the toilet, or give her the bedpan. Chris Nell, or maybe it was Jess, stepped up to the plate again. This time, before went the doorbell in favor of the old wham wham wham, open in the name of the law technique. He used his left fist to do this. He was still holding his gun in his right, the barrel pressed against the leg of his uniform pants. A terrible image, every bit as clear and persuasive as the auras he had seen, suddenly filled Ralph's mind. He saw a woman lying in bed with a clear plastic oxygen mask over her mouth and nose. Above the mask, her glazed eyes bulged slightlessly from their sockets. Below it, her throat had been opened in a wide, ragged smile. Bedcloths and the bosom of the woman's nightgown was drenched in blood. Not far away, lying on the floor, was the face-down corpse of another woman, the companion. Marching up the back of his second woman's pink flannel nightgown were half a dozen stab wounds made by the points of Doc No. 1's scissors, and Ralph knew, if he raised the nightgown for a closer look, each would look a lot like the wound under his own arm, like the sort of oversized period made by children just learning to print. Ralph tried to blink the grisly vision away. It wouldn't go. He felt dull pain in his hands and saw he had closed them into tight fists. The nails were digging into his palms. He forced his hands open and clamped them on his thighs. Now the eye in his mind saw the woman in the pink nightgown twitching slightly. She was still alive. But maybe not for long, almost certainly not for long unless these two oafs decided to try something a little more productive than just standing on the stoop and taking turns knocking or jazzing the doorbell. "Come on, you guys," Ralph said, squeezing at his thighs. Come on, let's get with it. What do you say?" "You know the things you're seeing are all in your head, don't you?" he asked himself uneasily. "I mean, there might be a couple of women lying dead over there. Sure, there might be. But you don't know that, right? It's not like the auras or the tracks." No, it wasn't like the auras or the tracks, and yes, he did know that. He also knew that no one was answering the door over there at 86 Harris Avenue. And that did not bode well for Bill McGovern's old Cardville schoolmate. He hadn't seen any blood on the scissors in Doc No. 1's hand, but given the iffy quality of the old Zeiss Icon binocs, that didn't prove much. Also, the guy could have wiped them clear before leaving the house. The thought had no more than crossed Ralph's mind before his imagination added a bloody hand towel lying beside the dead companion in the pink nightgown. "Come on, you two," Ralph cried in a low voice. "Jesus Christ, you gonna stand there all night?" More headlights splashed up Harris Avenue. The new arrivals were unmarked Ford sedan with a flashing red dashboard bulb. The man who got out was wearing plainclothes, gray poplin windbreaker, and blue knitted watch cap. Ralph had maintained momentary hopes that the newcomer would turn out to be John Lydecker. Even though Lydecker had told him he wouldn't be coming on until noon, but he didn't have the check with the binoculars to make sure it wasn't. This man was much slimmer and wearing a dark mustache. Cop No. 2 went down the walk to meet him while Chris or Jess Nell went around the corner of Mrs. Loker's house. One of those pauses which the movie so conveniently edited out then ensued. Cop No. 2 reholstered his gun. He and the newly arrived detective stood at the foot of Mrs. Loker's stoop, apparently talking and glancing at the closed door every now and then. Once the uniformed cop took a step or two in the direction Nell had gone, the detective reached out, grasped his arm, detained him. They talked some more. Ralph clutched his upper thighs tighter and made a small, frustrated noise in his throat. A few minutes crawled by, and then everything happened at once in that confusing, overlapping, inconclusive way with which emergency situations seem to develop. Another police car arrived, Mrs. Loker's house, and those neighboring in it on the right and left were now bathed in streaks of conflicting red and yellow light. Two more uniformed cops got out of it, opened the trunk, and removed a bulky contraption that looked to Ralph like a portable torture device. He believed this gadget was known as the Jaws of Life. Following the huge storm in the spring of 1985, a storm which had resulted in the deaths of more than 200 people, many of whom had been trapped and drowned in their cars, Derry's school children had mounted a penny drive to buy one. As the two new cops were carrying the Jaws of Life across the sidewalk, the front door of the house on the uphill side of Mrs. Loker's opened, and the Eberless, Stan, and Georgina stepped out onto their stoop. They wore matching his and hers bathrobes, and Stan's gray hair was standing up in wild tufts that made Ralph think of Charlie Pickering. He raised the binoculars, scanned their curious, excited faces briefly, then put them back on his lap. The next vehicle to appear was an ambulance from Derry Home Hospital. Like the police cars which had already arrived, its howler was off in deference to the hour, but it had a full roof rack of red lights, and they were strobing wildly. To Ralph, the developments across the street looked like a scene from one of his beloved Dirty Harry movies, only with the sound turned off. The two cops got the Jaws of Life halfway across the lawn and then dropped it. The detective in the windbreaker and watch cap turned to them and raised his hands to shoulder level, palms out, as if to say, "What did you think you were going to do with that thing? Break down the goddamn door with it?" The same second, Officer Nell came back around the house. He was shaking his head. The detective in the watch cap abruptly turned, brushed past Nell and his partner, mounted the steps, raised one foot, and kicked in May Loker's front door. He paused to unzip his jacket, probably to free access to his gun, and then walked in without looking back. Ralph felt like applauding. Nell and his partner looked at each other with uncertainty, then followed the detective up the steps and through the door. Ralph leaned forward even farther in his chair, now close enough to the window for his nostrils to make little fog roses on the glass. Three men there, white hospital pants, looking orange in the glare of the high-intensity street lamps, got out of the ambulance. One of them opened the rear doors, and then all three of them simply stood there, hands in jacket pockets waiting to see if they would be needed. The two cops who carried the jaws of life halfway across Mrs. Loker's lawn looked at each other, shrugged, picked it up, and began carrying it back toward their cruiser again. There were several large divots in the lawn where they had dropped it. Just let her be okay, that's all, Ralph thought. Just let her, and anyone who was in the house with her, be okay. The detective appeared in the doorway again, and Ralph's heart sank as he motioned to the men standing at the rear of the ambulance. Two of them removed a stretcher with a collapsible undercarriage. The third remained where he was. The men with the stretcher went up the walk and into the house at a smart pace, but they did not run, and when the orderly who had remained behind produced a pack of cigarettes and lit one, Ralph knew, suddenly, completely, that with no doubts that May Loker was dead. Section 6. Stanley, Georgina, and Eberly walked to the low line of the hedge which separated their front yard from Mrs. Loker's. They had put their arms around each other's waist, and to Ralph they looked like the Bobbsey twins grown old and fat and frightened. Other neighbors were also coming out, either awakened by the silent convergence of emergency lights or because of the telephone work along this little stretch of Harris Avenue was already beginning to operate. Most of the people Ralph saw were old. Wee golden agers, Bill McGovern liked to call them, always with the small, satirical lift of the eyebrows, of course. Men and women whose rest was fragile and easily broken at the best of times. He suddenly realized that Ed, Helen, and baby Natalie had been the youngest people between here and the extension, and now the Dipnews were gone. I could go down there, he thought. I'd fit right in, just another one of Bill's golden agers. Except he couldn't. His left legs felt like bunches of tea bags, held together by weak twists of string. He was quite sure that if he tried to get up, he would go flopping bonelessly to the floor. So he sat and watched from his window, watched the play develop below him on the stage, which had always been empty at this hour before. Except for the occasional walk-through by Rosalie, that was. It was a play he had produced himself with a single anonymous phone call. He watched the orderlies re-emerge with a stretcher, this time moving more slowly because of the sheeted figure which had been strapped to it. Warring streaks of blue and red light flickered over that sheet, and the shapes of legs, hips, arms, neck, and head beneath it. Ralph was suddenly plunged back into his dream. He saw his wife under the sheet, not May Loker, but Carolyn Roberts. And at any moment, her head would split open, and the black bugs, the ones which had grown fat on the meat of her diseased brain, would begin to boil out. Ralph raised the heels of his palms to his eyes. Some inarticulate sound of grief and rage, horror and weariness, escaped him. He sat that way for a long time, wishing he had never seen any of this, and hoping blindly that, if there really was a tunnel, he would not be required to enter it after all. The horrors were strange and beautiful, but there was not enough beauty in all of them to make up for one moment of that terrible dream in which he had discovered his wife buried below the high tide line. Not enough beauty to make up for the dreary horror of this, his lost, wakeful nights, or the sight of that sheeted figure being rolled out of the house across the street. It was a lot more than just wishing that the play was over. As he sat there with the heels of his palms pressed against the lids of his closed eyes, he wanted all of it to be over, all of it. For the first time in his 25,000 days of life, Ralph Roberts found himself wishing he were dead. Chapter 9. Section 1. There was a movie poster, probably picked up at one of the local video stores for $1 or $3, on the wall of the chubby hole which served Detective John Lydecker as an office. It showed Dumbo the elephant cruising along with his magical ears outstretched. A headshot of Susan Day had been pasted over Dumbo's face, carefully cut to allow for the trunk. On the cartoon landscape below, someone had drawn a signpost which read, Dairy 250. "Oh, charming," Ralph said. Lydecker laughed. "Not very politically correct, is it?" "I think that's an understatement," Ralph said, wondering what Carolyn would have made of the poster, wondering what Helen would make of it, for that matter. It was 1:45 on an overcast, chilly Monday afternoon, and he and Lydecker had just come across from the Derry County Courthouse, where Ralph had given his statement about his encounter with Charlie Pickering the day before. He had been questioned by an assistant district attorney, who looked at Ralph as if he might be ready to start shaving in another year or two. Lydecker had accompanied him, as promised, sitting in the corner of the assistant DA's office and saying nothing. His promise to buy Ralph a cup of coffee turned out to be mostly a figure of speech. The evil-looking brew had come from the silex in the corner of the cluttered second-floor police headquarters day room. Ralph sipped cautiously at his and was relieved to find it tasted a little better than it looked. "Sugar? Cream?" Lydecker asked. "Gun to shoot it with?" Ralph smiled and shook his head. "Tastes fine, although it'd probably be a mistake to trust my judgment. I cut back to 2 cups a day last summer, and now it all tastes pretty good to me. Like me with cigarettes. The less I smoke, the better they taste. Sin's a bitch." Lydecker took out his little tube of toothpicks, shook one out, and stuck it in the corner of his mouth. Then he put his own cup on top of the computer terminal, went over to the Dumbo poster, and began to lever out the thumbtacks which held the corners. "Don't do it on my account," Ralph said. "It's your office." "Wrong." Lydecker pulled the carefully scissored photo of Susan Day off the poster, balled it up, tossed it in the wastebasket. Then he began to roll the poster itself into a tight little cylinder. "Oh, then how come your name's on the door?" "It's my name, but the office belongs to you and your fellow taxpayers, Ralph. Also to any new news vidiot with a minicam who happens to wander in here, and if the poster happened to show up on News at Noon, I'd be in a world of hurt. I forgot to take it down when I left Friday night, and I had most of the weekend off. A rare occurrence around here, let me tell you." "You didn't put it up, I take it?" Ralph moved some papers off the tiny office's one extra chair and sat down. "Nope, some of the fellas had a party for me Friday afternoon, complete with cake, ice cream, and presents." Lydecker rummaged in his desk and came up with a rubber band. He slipped it around the poster so it wouldn't spring open again. Peeked out amused eye, threw it at Ralph, then tossed it into the wastebasket. "I got a set of those days of the week panties with the crotches snipped out, a can of strawberry-scented vaginal douche, a packet of Friends of Life anti-abortion literature," said literature including a comic book called Denise's Unwanted Pregnancy, and that poster. "I guess it wasn't a birthday party, huh?" "Nope." Lydecker cracked his knuckles and sighed at the ceiling. "The boys were celebrating my appointment to a special detail." Ralph could see faint flickers of blue aura around Lydecker's face and shoulders, but in this case he didn't have to try and read them. "It's Susan Day, isn't it? You got the job of protecting her while she's in town?" "Hole in one. Of course the state police will be around, but they stick pretty much to traffic control in situations like this. There may be some FBI too, but what they do mostly is hang back, take pictures, and give each other the secret club sign." "She's got her own security people, doesn't she?" "Yes, but I don't know how many or how good. I talked to the head guy this morning, and he's at least coherent. But we have to put in our own guys, 5 of them, according to the orders I got. That's me plus 4 guys who will volunteer as soon as I tell them to. The object is... Wait a minute, you'll like this." Lydecker shoveled through the papers in his desk, found the one he was looking for, and held it up. "To maintain a strong presence and high visibility." He dropped the paper again and grinned at Ralph. The grin did not have a lot of humor in it. "In other words, if someone tries to shoot the bitch or give her an acid shampoo, we want Lysette Benson and the other idiots to at least record the fact that we were there." Lydecker looked at the rolled-up poster, laying in his wastebasket, and flipped at the bird. "How can you dislike someone so much when you've never even met her?" "I don't just dislike her, Ralph. I fucking hate her. Listen, I'm a Catholic. My living mother was a Catholic. My kids, if I ever have any, all gonna be altar boys at St. Joe's Great. Being a Catholic's great. They even let you eat meat on Fridays now. But if you think being Catholic means I'm in favor of making abortions illegal again, you got the wrong puppy. See, I'm the Catholic who gets to question the guys who beat their kids with rubber hoses or push them downstairs after a night of drinking good Irish whiskey and getting all sentimental about their mothers." Lydecker fished inside his shirt and brought out a small gold medallion. He placed it on his fingers and tilted it toward Ralph. "Mary, Mother of Jesus, I've worn this since I was 13. 5 years ago I arrested a man wearing one just like it. He had just boiled his 2-year-old stepson. This is a true thing I'm telling you. Guy put on a great big pot of water, and when it was boiling, he picked the kid up by the ankles and dropped him into the pot like he was a lobster. Why? Because the kid wouldn't stop wetting the bed, he told us. I saw the body, and I'll tell you what, after you've seen something like that, the photos of right-to-life assholes like to show of vacuum abortions don't look so bad. Whitaker's voice had picked up a slight tremor. What I remember most of all is how the guy was crying, and how he kept holding on to that Mary medallion around his neck and saying he wanted to go to confession. Made me proud to be a Catholic, Ralph, let me tell you. And as far as the Pope goes, I don't think he should be allowed to have an opinion until he's had a kid himself, or at least spent a year or so taking care of crack babies. Alright, so we're going to stop right there and go to our first music break. And on this break we have the lovely and talented Miss Mia Savage with her group Antidote for Savages. And she will be singing Your Skeleton, Our New Reality, Let Me Be Your Home, and The Mirroring Crypto. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back after this music break.
shit that he brings anymore. You're mine. You're mine. Tonight. You're mine. Lost souls in a sea of broken hearts. Won't let you fall apart. We'll make a brand new start. When you coming back, I wanna take a ride. I wanna show him love. I wanna knock him leave me alone. Somebody please take me home. Rest of time.
Welcome back, and thanks so much for hanging out with me tonight on We Are Paradox Media's Late Night in the Rockies. Tonight it's story time with me, TessaTNT, and we have been reading from Stephen King's Insomnia. Okay, Ralph said. What's your problem with Susan Day? She's stirring the motherfucking pot, Lidecker cried. She comes into my town and I have to protect her. Fine. I've got good men, and with just a pinch of luck, I think we can probably see her out of town with her head still on and her tits pointing the right way. But what about what happens before? And what happens after? Do you think she cares about any of that? Do you think the people who run women care give much of a shit about the side effects as far as that goes? Well, I don't know. The women care advocates are a little less prone to violence than the Friends of Life, but in terms of all the important ass-ache quotient, they're not much different. Do you know what this was all about when it started? Ralph cast his memory back to his first conversation about Susan Day, the one that he'd had with Ham Davenport. For a moment he almost had it, but then it squiggled away. The insomnia had won again. He shook his head. Zoning, Lidecker said, and laughed with disgusted amazement. Plain old garden variety zoning regulations. Great, huh? Early this summer, two of our more conservative city councilors, George Tandy and Emma Wheaton, petitioned the zoning committee to consider the zone with women care in it. The idea being to kind of gerrymander the place out of existence. I doubt if that's exactly the right word, but you get the gist, don't you? Sure. So the pro-choicers asked Susan Day to come to town and make a speech, help them to raise a war chest to combat the pro-life Grinches. The only problem is the Grinches never had a chance of rezoning District 7, and the women care people knew it. Hell, one of their directors, June Holiday, is on the city council. She and the Wheaton bitch just about spit at each other when they pass in the hall. Rezoning District 7 was a pipe dream from the start because women care is technically a hospital just like Derry Home, which is only a stone's throw away. If you change the zoning laws to make women care illegal, you do the same to one of only 3 hospitals in Derry County, the 3rd largest county in the state of Maine. So it was never going to happen, but that's okay, because it was never about that in the first place. It was about being pissy and in your face, about being an ass-ache, and for most of the pro-choicers, one of the guys I work with calls them the well people. It's about being right. Right? I don't get you. It isn't enough that women can walk in there and get rid of the troublesome little fishy growing inside her anytime she wants. The pro-choicers want the argument to end. What they want, down deep, is for people like Dan Dalton to admit they're right. And that'll never happen. It's more likely that the Arabs and the Jews will decide it was all a mistake to throw down their weapons. I support the right of women to have an abortion if she really needs to have one, but the pro-choicers' holier-than-thou attitude makes me want to puke. They're the new Puritans, as far as I'm concerned. People who believe that if you don't think the way they do, you're going to hell. Only their version is a place where all you get on the radio is hillbilly music and all you can find to eat is chicken fried steak. You sound pretty bitter. Try sitting on a powder keg for 3 months and see how it makes you feel. Tell me this, do you think Pickering would have stuck a knife in your armpit yesterday if it hadn't been for woman care, friends of life, the Susan leave my sacred twat alone day? Ralph appeared to give the question serious thought, but what he was really doing was watching John Lydecker's aura. It was a healthy dark blue, but the edges were tinged with rapidly shifting greenish light. It was this edging which interested Ralph. He had an idea he knew what it meant. Finally he said, "No, I guess not." "Me either. You gotta wonder, in war, that's already been decided, Ralph, and you won't be the last. But if you went to the well people or to Susan Day and opened your shirt and pointed at the bandage and said, 'This is partly your fault, so own the part that's yours,' they'd raise their hands and say, 'Oh no, goodness no, we're sorry you got hurt, Ralph. We well watchers abhor violence, but it wasn't our fault. We have to keep women care open. We have to men and women the barricades, and if a little spilled blood is what it takes to do that, then so be it. But it's not about women care, and that's what drives me absolutely bugfuck. It's about abortion. Shit no, abortion rights are safe in Maine and in Derry, no matter what Susan Day says at the Civic Center Friday night. This is about those whose team is the best team, about whose side God's on. It's about who's right. I wish they'd all just sing, 'We are champions,' and go get drunk." Ralph threw back his head and laughed. Lydecker laughed with them. "So they're assholes," he finished with a shrug. "But there are assholes." Does that sound like I'm joking? I'm not. Women care friends of life. Body Watch, Daily Bread. They are our assholes. Dairy assholes. And I really don't mind watching out for our own. That's why I took this job, and why I stay with it. But you'll have to forgive me if I'm less than crazy about being trapped to watch out for some long-stemmed American beauty from New York who's going to fly in here and give an incendiary speech and then fly out with a few more press clippings and enough material for Chapter 5 of her new book. To our faces, she'll talk about what a wonderful little grassroots community we are, and when she gets back to her duplex on Park Avenue, she'll tell her friends about how she hasn't managed to shampoo the stink of our paper mills out of her hair yet. She is woman, hear her roar, and if you're lucky, the whole thing will quiet down with no one dead or disabled. Checking the sound. Alright, looking good. Ralph had become sure that those greenish flickers meant. But you're scared, aren't you? He asked. Lydecker looked at him, surprised. Shows, does it? Only a little, Ralph said, and thought, just in your aura, John, that's all, just in your aura. Yeah, I'm scared. On a personal level, I'm scared of fucking up the assignment, which is absolutely no upside to compensate for all the things that can go wrong. On a professional level, I'm scared of something happening to her on my watch. On a community level, I'm fucking terrified of what happens if there's some sort of confrontation and the genie comes out of the bottle. More coffee, Ralph? I'll pass. I ought to be going soon anyways. What's going on and going to happen to Pickering? He didn't actually care much about Charlie Pickering's fate, but the big cop would probably think it strange if he asked about May Loker before he asked about Pickering. Suspicious, maybe. Steve Anderson, the ADA who questioned you, and Pickering's court-appointed attorney are probably horse-trading even as we speak. Pickering's guy will be saying he might be able to get his client, the thought of Charlie Pickering being anyone's client, for anything sort of blows my mind, by the way, to plead out to second-degree assault. Anderson will say the time has come to put Pickering away for good and he's going to go for attempted murder. Pickering's lawyer will pretend to be shocked, and tomorrow your buddy is going to be charged with first-degree assault with a deadly weapon and bound over for trial. Then possibly in December, but more likely early next year, you'll be called as the star witness. Bail? It'll probably be set on the $40,000 range. You can get out on 10% if the rest can be secured in event of flight, but Charlie Pickering doesn't have a house, a car, or even a Timex watch. In the end, he's liable to go back to Juniper Hill, but that's really not the object of the game. We're going to be able to keep him off the street for quite a while this time, and with people like Charlie, that's the object of the game. Any chance the Friends of Life might go? His bell? Nah, Ed Dipney spent a lot of last week with them. The two of them drinking coffee in the bagel shop. I imagine Ed was giving Charlie the lowdown on Centurions and the King of Diamonds. Crimson King is what Ed... Whatever, Lydecker agreed, waving a hand. But most of all, I imagine he spent the time explaining how you were the devil's right-hand man and how only a smart, brave, dedicated fellow like Charlie Pickering could take you out of the picture. You make him sound like such a calculating shit, Ralph said. He was remembering the Ed Dipnew he'd played chess with before Carolyn had fallen ill. That Ed had been an intelligent, well-spoken, civilized man with a deep capacity for kindness. Ralph still found it all but impossible to reconcile that Ed, with the one he'd first glimpsed in July of 1992, he'd come to think of more recent arrival as Rooster Ed. Not just a calculating shit, a dangerous calculating shit, Lydecker said. For him, Charlie was just a fool, like a paring knife you'd use to peel an apple. If the blade snaps off a paring knife, you don't run the knife grinders to get a new one put on. That's too much trouble. You toss it to the wastebasket and get a new paring knife instead. That's the way guys like Ed treat guys like Charlie, and since Ed is the Friends of Life, for the time being, at least, I don't think you have to worry about Charlie making bail. In the next few days, he's going to be lonelier than a Maytag repairman, okay? Okay, Ralph said. He was a little appalled to realize he felt sorry for Pickering. I want to thank you for keeping my name out of the paper, too. If you were the one who did it, that is. There had been a brief mention of the incident in the Derry News police beat column, but it said only that Charles H. Pickering had been arrested on a weapons charge at the Derry Public Library. Sometimes we ask them for a favor, sometimes they ask us for one, Lydecker said, standing up. It's how things work in the real world. If the nuts and the Friends of Life and the prigs and the Friends of Woman Care ever discovered that, my job is going to get a lot easier. Ralph plucked the rolled-up Dumbo poster from the wastebasket, then stood up on his side of Lydecker's desk. Could I have this? I know a little girl who might really like it in a year or so. Lydecker held out his hands expansively. Be my guest. Think of it as a little premium of being a good citizen. Just don't ask for my crotchless nannies. Ralph laughed. Wouldn't think of it. Seriously, I appreciate you coming in. Thanks, Ralph. No problem. He reached across the desk, shook Lydecker's hand, and then headed for the door. He felt absurdly like Lieutenant Columbo on TV. All he needed was the cigar and the ratty trench coat. He put his hand on the knob, then paused and turned back. Can I ask you about something totally unrelated to Charlie Pickering? Fire away. Well, this morning, in the Red Apple store, I heard that Mrs. Loker, my neighbor up the street, died in the night. Nothing so surprising about that. She had emphysema, but there are police line tapes up between the sidewalk and her front yard, plus a sign on the door saying the site has been sealed by the Derry PD. Do you know what that's about? Lydecker looked at him so long and hard that Ralph would have felt acutely uncomfortable, if not for the man's aura. There was nothing in it which communicated suspicion. God, Ralph, you're taking these things a little too seriously, aren't you? Well, maybe yes and maybe no. Either way, he was glad that he saw the green flickers at the edge of Lydecker's aura had not reappeared. Why are you looking at me that way? Ralph asked. If I presumed or spoke out of turn, I'm sorry. Not at all, Lydecker said. It's a little weird, that's all. If I tell you about it, can you keep it quiet? Yes. It's your downstairs tenant I'm chiefly worried about. When the word discretion is mentioned, it's not the professor I think of. Ralph laughed heartily. I won't say a word to him, Scout's honor, but it's interesting you'd mention him. Bill went to school with Mrs. Loker way back when grammar school. Man, I can't imagine the professor in grammar school, Lydecker said. Can you? Sort of, Ralph said, but the picture which rose in his mind was an exceedingly peculiar one. Bill McGovern, looking like a cross between Little Lord Fauntleroy and Tom Sawyer in a pair of knickers, long white socks, and a Panama hat. We're not sure what happened to Mrs. Loker, Lydecker said. What we do know is that shortly after 3 a.m., 911 logged an anonymous call from someone, a male who claimed to have just seen 2 men, one carrying a pair of scissors, come out of Mrs. Loker's house. She was killed? Ralph exclaimed, realizing 2 things simultaneously. That he sounded more believable than he ever would have expected, and that he had just crossed a bridge. He hadn't burned it behind him, not yet anyway, but he would not be able to go back to the other side without a lot of explanations. Lydecker turned his hands, palms up, and shrugged. If she was, it wasn't with a pair of scissors or any other sharp object. There wasn't a mark on her. That, at least, was something of a relief. On the other hand, it's possible to scare someone to death, especially someone who's old and sick, during the commission of a crime, Lydecker said. Anyway, this will be easier to explain if you let me just tell you what I know. It won't take long, believe me. Of course, sorry. Want to hear something funny? The first person I thought of when I looked over the 911 call sheet was you. Because of the insomnia, right? Ralph asked. His voice was steady. That and the fact that the caller claimed to have seen these men from his living room. Your living room looks out on the avenue, doesn't it? Yes. I even thought of listening to the tape when I remembered that you were coming in today, and that you're sleeping through again. That's right, isn't it? Without an instant or pause of consideration, Ralph set fire to the bridge he had just crossed. Well, I'm not sleeping like I did when I was 16 and working 2 after-school jobs. I won't kid you about that, but if I was the guy who called 911 last night, I did it in my sleep. Exactly what I figured. Besides, if you saw something a little off-kilter on the street, why would you make the call anonymously? I don't know, Ralph said and thought, but suppose it was a little more than off-kilter, John. Suppose it was completely unbelievable. Me neither, Lydecker said. Your place has a view of Harris Avenue, yes, but so do about 3 dozen others, and just because the guy who made the call said he was inside, that doesn't mean he really was, does it? I guess not. There's a payphone outside the Red Apple he could have called from, plus one outside the liquor store, a couple in Strawford Park, too, if they work. Actually, there are 4 in the park, and they all work. We checked. Why would he lie about where he was calling from? The most likely reason is because he was lying about the rest of what he had to say, too. Anyway, Donna Hagen said the guy sounded very young and sure of himself. The words were barely out of his mouth before Lydecker winced and put a hand on the top of his head. It didn't come out just the way I meant it, Ralph. Sorry. It's okay. The idea that I sound like an old fart on a pension is not exactly a new concept to me. I am an old fart on a pension. Go on. Chris Nell was the responding officer first on the scene. Do you remember him from the day we arrested Ed? I remember the name. Steve Utterback was the responding detective and the OIC, officer in charge. He's a good man. The guy in the watch cap, Ralph thought. The lady was dead in bed, but there was no sign of violence, nothing obviously taken either. although old ladies like May Loker aren't usually into a lot of real hawkable stuff. No VCR, no big fancy stereo, nothing like that. She did have one of those Bose waves, though, and 2 or 3 pretty nice pieces of jewelry. This is not to say that there wasn't other jewelry as nice or nicer, but why would a burglar take some and not all? Exactly. What's more interesting in this case is that the front door, the one the 911 caller said he saw the 2 men coming out of, was locked from the inside. Not just a spring lock either. There was a thumb bolt and a chain. Same with the back door, by the way. So if the 911 caller was on the up and up, and if May Loker was dead when the 2 guys left, who locked the doors? Maybe it was the Crimson King, Ralph thought, and to his horror, almost said aloud, I don't know, what about the windows? Locked, thumb latches turned, and just in case that's Agatha Christie enough for you, Steve says the storms were on. One of the neighbors told him Mrs. Loker's hired a kid to put them on last week. Sure she did, Ralph said. Pete Sullivan, the kid who delivers the newspaper. Now that I think of it, I saw him doing it. Mystery novel bullshit, Lydecker said, but Ralph thought Lydecker would have swapped Susan Day for May Loker in about 3 seconds. The prelim medical came in just before I left for the courthouse to meet you. I had a glance at it. Myocardial this, thrombosis, that, heart failure's what it comes down to. Right now we're treating the 911 call as a crank. We get them all the time. All cities do, and the lady's death is a heart attack brought on by her emphysema. Just a coincidence, in other words. The conclusion might save him a lot of trouble if it flew. That was, but Ralph could hear the disbelief in his own voice. Yeah, I don't like it either. Neither does Steve, which is why the house has been sealed. State forensics will give it a complete top to bottom, probably starting tomorrow morning. Meanwhile, Mrs. Loker has taken a little ride down to Augusta for a more comprehensive post-mortem. Who knows what it'll show? Sometimes they do show things. You'd be surprised. I suppose I would, Ralph said. Lydecker tossed his toothpick into the trash and appeared to brood for a moment, then brightened up. Hey, here's an idea. Maybe I'll get someone in clerical to make a dupe of that 911 call. I could bring it over and play it for you. Maybe you'll recognize the voice? Who knows? Stranger things have happened. I suppose they have, Ralph said, smiling uneasily. Anyway, it's Utterback's case. Come on, I'll see you out. In the hall, Lydecker gave Ralph another searching look. This one made Ralph feel a good deal more uncomfortable because he had no idea what it meant. The oars had disappeared again. He tried on a smile that felt lame. Something hanging out of my nose that shouldn't be? Nope, I'm just amazed at how good you look for someone who went through what you did yesterday, and compared to how you looked last summer, if that's what honeycomb can do, I'm going to buy myself a beehive. Ralph laughed as though this were the funniest thing he had ever heard. Section 2. 1:42 a.m. Tuesday morning. Ralph sat in the wing chair watching wheels of fine mist revolve around the streetlights. Up the street, the police line tapes hung dispiritedly in front of May Loker's house. Barely 2 hours sleep tonight, and he found himself again thinking that dead might be better. No more insomnia then, no more long waits for John in this hateful chair, no more days when he seemed to be looking at the world through the garbled, invisible shield they used to prattle about on toothpaste commercials, back when TV had been almost brand new. That had been in the days when he had yet to find the first strands of gray in his hair, and he was always asleep 5 minutes after he and Carol had finished making love. And people keep talking about how good I look. That's the weirdest part of it. Except it wasn't, considering some of the things he'd been through and seen lately. A few people saying he looked like a new man was far, far down on his list of oddities. Ralph's eyes returned to May Loker's house. The place had been locked up, according to Lydecker, but Ralph had seen the 2 little bald doctors come out the front door. He had seen them. God damn it. But had he? Had he really? Ralph cast his mind back to the previous morning, sitting down in his same chair with a cup of tea and thinking, let the play begin. And then he had seen those 2 little bald bastards come out. Damn it. He had seen them come out of May Loker's house. Except maybe that was wrong, because he hadn't really been looking at Mrs. Loker's house. He had been pointing more in the direction of the red apple. He thought the flicker of movement in the corner of his eye was probably Rosalie, and had turned his head to check. That was when he'd seen the little bald doctors on the stoop of Mayloker's house. He was no longer entirely sure he had seen the front door open. Maybe he had just assumed that part, and why not? He sure as hell hadn't come up Miss Loker's walk. You can't be sure of that, Ralph. Except he could. At 3 a.m, Harris Avenue was still as the mountains of the moon. The slightest movement anywhere within the range of his vision registered. Had Doc number 1 and Doc number 2 come out the front door? The longer Ralph thought about it, the more he doubted it. Then what happened, Ralph? Did they maybe step out from behind the guard or invisible shield? Or how's this? Maybe they walked through the door, like those ghosts that used to haunt Cosmo Topper in that old TV show. And the craziest thing of all was that felt just about right. What? That they walked through the fucking door? Oh, Ralph, you need help. You need to talk to someone about what's happening to you. Yes, that was the one thing of which he was sure. He needed to spill all this to someone before it drove him crazy. But who? Carolyn would have been best, but she was dead. Lydecker? The problem there was that Ralph had already lied to him about the 911 call. Why? Because the truth would have sounded insane. It would have sounded, in fact, as if he had caught Ed Dipnew's paranoia, like a cold. And wasn't that really the most likely explanation when you looked at the situation dead on? But that's not it, he whispered. They were real, the auras too. It's a long walk back to Eden, sweetheart, and watch out for those green gold white man tracks while you're on the way. Tell someone, lay it all out. Yes, and he ought to do it before John Lydecker listened to that 911 tape and showed up asking for an explanation, wanting to know basically why Ralph had lied and what Ralph actually knew about the death of May Loker. Tell someone, lay it all out. But Carolyn was dead. Lydecker was still too new. Helen was lying low at the women care shelter, somewhere out in the willy wags, and Lois Chase might gossip to her girlfriends. Who need that leave? The answer became clear once he put it to himself that way. But Ralph still felt a surprising reluctance to talk to McGovern about the things which had been happening to him. He remembered the day that he found Bill sitting on a bench by the softball field, crying over his old friend and mentor, Bob Paulhurst. Ralph had tried to tell Bill about the auras, and it had been as if McGovern couldn't hear him. He had been too busy running through his well-thumbed script on the subject of how shitty it was to grow old. Ralph thought of the satiric raised eyebrow, the unfailing cynicism, the long face, always so gloomy, the literary allusions, which usually made Ralph smile, but often left him feeling a tad inferior as well. And then there was McGovern's attitude toward Lois, condescending, even a touch cruel. Yet this was a long way from being fair, and Ralph knew it. Bill McGovern was capable of kindness and, perhaps far more important in this case, understanding. He and Ralph had known each other for over 20 years. For the last 10 of those years, they had lived in the same building. He had been one of Carolyn's pallbearers, and if Ralph couldn't talk to Bill about what had been happening to him, who could he talk to? The answer seemed to be no one. Chapter 10 Section 1 The misty rings around the street lamp were gone by the time daylight began to brighten the sky in the east, and by 9 o'clock the day was clear and warm. The beginning of Indian summer's finally brief passage, perhaps. Ralph went downstairs as soon as Good Morning America was over, determined to tell McGovern what had been happening to him, or as much as he dared anyway, before he could lose his nerve. Standing outside the door of the downstairs apartment, however, he could hear the shower running, and the merciful, distant sound of William D. McGovern singing, "I left my heart in San Francisco." Ralph went out to the porch, stuck his hands in his back pockets, and read the day like a catalog. There was nothing, he reflected, really nothing in the world like October sunshine. He could almost feel his night miseries draining away. They would undoubtedly be back, but for now he felt all right, tired and muzzy-headed. Yes, but still pretty much all right. The day was more than pretty, it was downright gorgeous, and Ralph doubted that there would be another as good before next May. He decided he would be a fool not to take advantage of it. A walk up to Harris Avenue Extension and back again would take half an hour. 45 minutes if there happened to be someone up there worth batting a little breeze with, and by then Bill would be showered, shaved, combed, and dressed. also ready to lend a sympathetic ear if Ralph was lucky. He walked as far as the picnic area outside the county airport fence without quite admitting to himself that he was hoping to come across Old Door. If he did, perhaps the two of them could talk a little poetry, Stephen Dobbins, for instance, or maybe even a bit of philosophy. They might start that part of their conversation with Dorrance explaining what long-time business was and why he believed Ralph shouldn't mess in with it. Except Dorrance wasn't at the picnic area. No one was there but Don Veazey, who wanted to explain to Ralph why Bill Clinton was doing such a horrible job as president and why it would have been much better for the good old US of A if the American people had elected the fiscal genius Ross Perot. Ralph, who had voted for Clinton and actually thought the man was doing a pretty good job, listened long enough to be polite, then said he had an appointment to have his hair cut. It was the only thing he could think of on short notice. Something else, too, Don blared after him. That uppity wife of his, woman's a lesbian, I can always tell. You know how? I look at their shoes. Shoes is like a secret code with them. They always wear those ones, with the square toes in. See you, Don, Ralph called back, and beat a hasty retreat. He had gone about a quarter of a mile back down the hill when the day exploded silently all around him. Section 2. He was opposite May Loker's house when it happened. He stopped dead in his tracks, staring down Harris Avenue with wide, unbelieving eyes. His right hand was pressed against the base of his throat, and his mouth hung open. He looked like a man having a heart attack, and while his heart seemed all right, for the time being anyway, he certainly felt as if he were having some kind of an attack. Nothing he had seen this fall had prepared him for this. Ralph didn't think anything could have prepared him for this. That other world, the secret world of auras, had come into view again, and this time there was more of it than Ralph had ever dreamed. So much that he wondered fleetingly if it was possible for a person to die, a perceptual overload. Upper Harris Avenue was a fiercely glowing wonderland filled with overlapping spheres and cones and crescents of color. The trees, which were still a week or more away from the climax of their fall transformation, nonetheless burned like torches in Ralph's eyes and mind. The sky had gone past. It was a vast blue sonic boom. Telephone lines on Derry's west side were still above ground, and Ralph stared fixedly at them, vaguely aware that he had stopped breathing and should probably start again soon if he didn't want to pass out. Jagged yellow spirals were running briskly up and down the black wires, reminding Ralph of how barber poles had looked when he was a kid. Every now and then, this bumblebee pattern was broken by a spiky red vertical stroke or a green flash that seemed to spread both ways at once, obliterating the yellow rings for a moment before fading out. You were watching people talk, he thought numbly. Do you know that, Ralph? Aunt Sadie in Dallas is chatting with her favorite nephew, who lives in Derry. A farmer in Haven is jawing with a dealer he buys his tractor parts from. A minister is trying to help a troubled parishioner. Those are voices, and I think the bright strokes and flashes are coming from people in the grip of some strong emotion, love or hate, happiness or joy, or jealousy. And Ralph sensed that all that he was seeing and all he was feeling was not all, that there was a whole world still waiting just beyond the current reach of his senses, enough perhaps to make even what he was seeing now seem faint and faded. And if there was more, how could he possibly bear it without going mad? Not even putting his eyes out would help. He understood somehow that his sense of seeing these things came mostly from his lifelong acceptance of sight as his primary sense, but there was, in fact, a lot more than seeing going on here. In order to prove to himself, he closed his eyes and went right on seeing Harris Avenue. It was as if his eyelids had turned to glass. The only difference was that all the usual colors had reversed themselves, creating a world that looked like a negative of a color photograph. The trees were no longer orange and yellow, but the bright, unnatural green of lime Gatorade. The surface of Harris Avenue, repaved with fresh asphalt in June, had become a great white way, and the sky was an amazing red lake. He opened his eyes again, almost positive that the oars would be gone, but they weren't. The world still boomed and rolled with color and movement and deep, resonating sound. When do I start seeing them? Ralph wondered, as he began to walk slowly down the hill again. When did the little bald doctors start coming out of the woodwork? There were no doctors in evidence, however, bald or otherwise. No angles in the architecture. No devils peering from the sewer gratings. There was only, "Look out, Roberts. Watch where you're going, can't you?" The words, harsh and a little alarmed, seemed to have actually physical texture. It was like running a hand over oak paneling in some ancient abbey or ancestral hall. Ralph stopped short and saw Mrs. Perrine from down the street. She had stepped off the sidewalk into the gutter to keep from being bowled over like a tin pin, and now she stood ankle-deep in fall leaves, holding her net shopping bag in one hand and glaring at Ralph from beneath her thick salt and pepper eyebrows. The aura which surrounded her was the firm, no-nonsense gray of West Point uniform. "You drunk, Roberts?" she asked in a clipped voice. And suddenly the riot of color and sensation fell out of the world, and it was just Harris Avenue again, drowsing its way through a lovely weekday morning in mid-autumn. "Drunk? Me? Not at all. Sober as a judge, honest." He held his hand to Mrs. Perrine, over 80, but not giving in to it so much as a single inch, looked at it as if she believed Ralph might have a joy buzzer hidden in his palm. "Wouldn't put it past you, Roberts," her cool gray eyes said. "Wouldn't put it past you at all." She stepped back on the sidewalk without Ralph's aid. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Perrine. I wasn't watching where I was going." "No, you certainly weren't. Lollygagging along with your mouth hanging open is what I would say you were doing. You look like the village idiot." "Sorry," he repeated, then had to bite his tongue to stifle a bray of laughter. "Humph." Miss Perrine looked slowly up and down, like a Marine drill sergeant inspecting a raw recruit. "There's a rip under the arm of that shirt, Roberts." Ralph raised his arm and looked. There was indeed a large rip in his favorite plaid shirt. He could look through it and see the bandage with its dried spot of blood. Also, an unsightly tangle of old man armpit hair. He lowered his arm hurriedly, feeling a blush rising in his cheeks. "Humph," Miss Perrine said again, expressing everything she needed to express on the subject of Ralph Roberts, without recourse to a single vowel. "Drop it off at the house, if you like. Any other mending you might have, as well. I can still run a needle, you know." "Oh, yes, I'll bet you can, Mrs. Perrine." Mrs. Perrine now gave him a look which said, "You're a dried-up old ass-kisser, Ralph Roberts, but I suppose you can't help it." "Not in the afternoon," she said. "I help make dinner at the homeless shelter in the afternoons, and help serve it out at 5. It's God's work. Yes, I'm sure there'll be no homeless in heaven, Roberts. You can count on that. No rip shirts either, I'm sure. But while we're here, we have to get along and make do. It's our job. And I, for one, am doing spectacularly well." Sorry, guys, Well, I guess we had an issue with the internet there. Weird. Well, at least I still have towers. Yesterday was terrible. Bring your mending in the morning or in the evening, Roberts. Don't stand on ceremony, but don't you show up on my doorstep after 8:30. I go to bed at 9. "It's very kind of you, Mrs. Perrine," Ralph said, and had to bite his tongue again. He was aware that very soon this trick would cease to work. Soon it was going to be a case of laugh or die. "Not at all. Christian duty. Also, Carolyn was a friend of mine." "Thank you," Ralph said. "Terrible about May Loker, wasn't it?" "No," Mrs. Perrine said. "God's mercy," and she glided upon her way before Ralph could say another word. Her spine was so excruciatingly straight that it hurt him to look at it. He walked on a dozen steps, then could hold it no longer. He leaned before him against a telephone pole, pressed his mouth to his arm, and laughed as quietly as he could, laughed until tears poured down his cheeks. When the fit, and that was what it really felt like, a kind of hysterical seizure had passed, Ralph raised his head and looked around with attentive, curious, slightly teary eyes. He saw nothing that anyone else couldn't see as well, and that was a relief. But it will come back, Ralph. You know it will. All of it. Yes, he supposed he did know it, but that was for later. Right now, he had some talking to do. Section 3. When Ralph finally arrived back from his amazing journey up the street, McGovern was sitting on his chair on the porch and idling through the morning paper. As Ralph turned up the walk, he came to a sudden decision. He would tell Bill a lot, but not everything. One of the things he would definitely leave out was how much the two guys he'd seen coming out of Mrs. Loker's house had looked like aliens in the tabloids for sale at the Red Apple. McGovern looked up as he climbed the steps. Hello, Ralph. Hi, Bill. Can I talk to you about something? No, of course. He closed the paper and folded it carefully. They finally took my old friend Bob Polhurst to the hospital yesterday. Oh, I thought you expected that to happen sooner. I did. Everybody did. He fooled us. In fact, he seemed to be getting better, of the pneumonia at least. And then he relapsed. He had a breathing arrest yesterday around noon, and his niece thought he was going to die before the ambulance got there. He didn't, though, and now he seems to have stabilized again. McGovern looked up the street and sighed. May Loker pops off in the middle of the night, and Bob just keeps chugging along. What a world, huh? I guess so. What did you want to talk about? Have you finally decided to pop the question to Lois? Want a little fatherly advice on how to handle it? I need advice, all right, but not about my love life. Spill it, McGovern said tersely. Ralph did, gratified and more than a little relieved by McGovern's silent attentiveness. He began by sketching in things Bill already knew about, the incident between Ed and the truck driver in the summer of '92, and how similar Ed's reactions on the occasion had been to the things he had said on the day he had beaten Helen for signing the petition. As Ralph spoke, he began to feel more strongly than ever that there were connections between all the odd things which had been happening to him, connections he could almost see. He told McGovern about the auras, although not about the silent cataclysm he had experienced less than half an hour before. That was also further than he was willing to go. At least for the time being, McGovern knew about Charlie Pickering's attack on Ralph. Of course, and that Ralph had averted a much more serious injury by using the spray Helen and her friend had given him. But now Ralph told him something he had held back on Sunday night, when he told McGovern about the attack over the scratch dinner, how the spray can had magically appeared in his jacket pocket, except, he said, he suspected that the magician had been Old Door. Holy shit, McGovern explained. You've been living dangerously, Ralph. I guess so. How much of this have you told Johnny Lydecker? Very little, Ralph started to say, then realized that even that would be an exaggeration. Almost none of it, and there's something else I haven't told him, something a lot more substantive, I guess, to do with what happened up there. He pointed it toward Mrs. May Loker's house, where a couple of blue and white vans had just pulled up. Maine State Police was written on the sides. Ralph assumed that they were the forensics people Lydecker had mentioned. May? McGovern leaned a little further forward in his chair. You know something about what happened to May? I think I do. Speaking carefully, moving from word to word, like a man using stepping stones to cross a treacherous brook, Ralph told McGovern about waking up, going into the living room, and seeing two men come out of Mrs. Loker's house. He recounted his successful rummage for the binoculars and told McGovern about the scissors he had seen one of the men carrying. He did not mention his nightmare of Carolyn or the glowing tracks, and he most certainly did not mention his belated impression that the two men might have come right through the door. That would have finished off any remaining tatters of credibility he might still possess. He ended with his anonymous call to 911, then sat in his chair, looking at McGovern anxiously. McGovern shook his head, as if to clear it. Auras? Oracles? Mysterious housebreakers with scissors? You have been living dangerously. What do you think, Bill? McGovern sat quietly for several moments. He had rolled his newspaper up while Ralph was talking, and now he began to tap it absently against his leg. Ralph felt an urge to phrase his question even more bluntly. Do you think I'm crazy, Bill? And quashed it. Did he really believe that was the sort of question to which people gave honest answers? At least without a healthy shot of sodium pentothal first. That Bill might say, oh yes, I think you're just as crazy as a bedbug, Ralphie baby. So why don't we call Juniper Hill right away and see if they have a bed for you? Not very likely. And since any answer Bill gave would mean nothing, it was better to forego the question. I don't exactly know what I think, Bill said at last. Not yet, at least. What did they look like? Their faces were hard to make out, even with the binoculars, Ralph said. His voice was as steady as it had been yesterday when he denied calling 911. You probably don't have any idea of how old they were either. No. Could either of them have been our old pal from up the street? Ed Tipnew? Ralph looked at McGovern in surprise. No, neither one was Ed. What about Pickering? No, not Ed. Not Charlie Pickering. I would have known either of them. What are you driving at? That my mind just sort of buckled and put the two guys who caused me the most stress in the last months on Maggie Loker's front stoop? Of course not, McGovern replied, but the steady tap-tap-tap of the newspaper against his leg paused and his eyes flickered. Ralph felt a sinking in the pit of his stomach. Yes, that was, in fact, exactly what McGovern had been driving at, and it wasn't really so surprising, was it? Maybe not, but it didn't change the sinking feeling. And Johnny said all the doors were locked. Yes, from the inside. But... McGovern got up from his chair so suddenly that for one crazy moment Ralph had the idea that he was going to run away, perhaps screaming, "Watch out for Roberts, he's gone crazy," as he went. But instead of bolting down the steps, he turned toward the door leading back into the house. In some ways, Ralph found this even more alarming. What are you going to do? Call Larry Perrault, McGovern said. May's younger brother. He still lives out in Cardville. She'll be buried in Cardville, I imagine. McGovern gave Ralph a strange, spectacular look. What did you think I was going to do? Alright, well, on that note, boys and girls, we are going to go to our second music break. And on this break, we have the lovely and talented Miss Mia Savage with her group Antidote for Savages. And she'll be singing Bury Me in Heaven, Not a Phase, Singing to Your Grave. And the bottom line, you guys don't go anywhere. We'll be right back after this music break.
savings account. Just a choice right now between fear and love. Just a choice right now between fear and love.
I had it turned down pretty low for like the music I play, background music while I'm reading, but yeah, I didn't turn it back up for me. Yeah, I should have, but I didn't. Sorry. Sorry you couldn't crank it. But yeah, I was gonna do some more reading, but I think we'll watch a video instead, because this one just came through on my email and I really want to see it. Videos too crazy, even for 2004. Alrighty. This is from James LaFleur's YouTube. No way. That is impossible. Make sure you go over there and subscribe. He always does a really good job on his videos. Yeah, this video should be pretty dang good.
In just a few moments.
Are you recording it? Yeah. That's a
Es un hueso. Es un hueso enorme.
Why am I watching a TV show and realizing the people in the TV show live in my apartment unit?
What the? That is so weird. That's not a plane.
What the hell?
Oh my gosh, you just saw that door open and shut?
What the hell?
Dude.
These are pretty trippy.
What is that?
Hi, I'm James LaFleur and you're watching the Impossible channel. Welcome aboard. Don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel with notifications on for more videos like this. Today we're going to be taking a look at the most mysterious and unexplained videos that are trending this week. From the enigmatic video of a man who possibly found evidence of the existence of giants, to mysterious new videos of UFOs and their possible existence deep within the ocean. There's also bizarre videos of people buying products online and finding out that inside their products there are hidden trackers and sometimes secret messages. And while researching the topic, I found out that this could possibly lead to a deeper rabbit hole. These and many more creepy and unexplained videos that will definitely make you go, Are you guys ready? Well, best sit down, get your popcorn, because this is going to be a wild one. Let's go. Now, I don't know about you, but when I first came across YouTube, and this was quite a while ago, I remember searching for the wildest videos I could find online, and I guess that a lot of people do the same thing. And I remember coming across these amazing yet chilling videos of nuclear tests that were performed at the Bikini Atoll of the Pacific Ocean. These tests were conducted between 1946 and 1958 with the intention of testing explosions on naval equipment. And at the time, I remember asking myself if this was indeed the reason for these tests, or if this was some sort of cover-up for something else, something that was possibly found in the Pacific Ocean.
Monster?
It looks like a UFO, right? That's a UFO. Christian. Just stay right there. Look, it's just above there.
Are you recording it?
Yeah. That's a UFO. You can just see it.
Well, hiding on.
Bro, you can just see it. It's like the
Just keep recording it.
Well, just recently, a series of hearings were made public of officials confirming that aliens might actually inhabit the ocean, and this of course led many people to come up with the wildest theories. One of them being that the testings performed in the 1940s had a more sinister objective, to possibly target something that was hiding underneath the ocean. To make things even stranger, in April 2023 there was a supposed leak on 4chan where an anonymous user stated that most unknown objects that we spot here on Earth are actually deployed by a massive alien-like facility that has been hiding underneath the oceans for at least 100 years. Now, if this is the case, it would actually help explain why we've been seeing a constant rise in sightings.
I would say longer for sure.
Mine is.
What the That is so weird. That's not a plane.
Definitely not a plane.
I can't believe I'm seeing this right now. What? Hold on, keep filming. Do not stop filming.
Could it actually be that there's something massive hiding underneath the Pacific Ocean and actually deploying unknown objects into our surface?
Oh wow.
In April 2021, a family was watching television at their beach house in Mancera Island, located in Valdivia, Chile. This is when all of a sudden, they look outside and spot a mysterious object that appears to be swooshing from one side to the other very quickly. This is what they caught on camera.
What the heck? That's weird.
What looks like some sort of object can be clearly seen swooshing from one side to the other very quickly, and at times disappearing and reappearing at different locations. Now completely baffled by this mysterious phenomenon, the family decides to upload the video to the internet, and after doing so it amasses thousands of views and hundreds of comments. Some internet users think that this is possibly just a school of fish that's causing splashes on the surface of the water. However, most people seem to agree that this is something else, and most likely one of the best video evidence of the existence of unidentified submerged objects. Now, if we zoom in and replay the video a couple of times, it becomes quite clear that whatever this thing is, it's moving too fast to be fish. Not only that, The video was recorded in Chile, and for some mysterious reason, Chile is a hotspot for this type of sighting that occurs underwater. In this video, for instance, recorded at the border of Chile and Lake Moreno, Argentina, a person captures footage of an object that appears to shine beneath the water. The video was recorded by Adrian Cardozo in December 2020, and at the time, it left the entire internet completely baffled. Now, even though some believe that it could be just a ray of sunlight hitting the water, in other cases we can clearly see that it's not, and there's possibly something down there and no one knows what it is.
Yeah, it's trippy for sure.
In this particular video recorded on March 2024 in Lake Rapel in Chile, we can see something similar, but this time it's quite clear that it's not a ray of sunlight hitting the water. This is something else entirely.
What is that?
What appears to be a massive luminous object can be seen underneath the surface of the water. Whatever this thing is, it doesn't look like a ray of sunlight or divers. It actually looks as if it could be two round objects that are close to one another. But I'm not too sure. I've never seen anything like this, and after being posted to the internet, most people had absolutely no idea to what it could be. The thing is, if we start researching the topic, we'll find a number of stories and videos of people who supposedly came face to face with these mysterious objects that apparently hide somewhere in the ocean.
I wonder if this is the one where you can also see the alien.
Stories like these are quite common at sea,
and the
which
light, it was
leads us
weird.
to several questions, some of them being, where are these objects coming from and where are they going to? But when it comes to unexplained sightings, it doesn't stop there. Just a couple of weeks ago, Moonlover7754, an internet account who uploads live streams of the moon, captured something that left the entire internet scratching their heads. This is what they saw.
What the heck?
What at first looks like a luminous object can be seen hovering high up in the sky, and when they zoom in, it becomes quite clear that this is not a drone, a chopper, or anything like that.
It looks like balloons.
It looks as if it could be a set of balloons reflecting the sunlight. However, regular balloons usually burst at around 10 kilometers of altitude, and being that whatever it is that they're aiming at is really high up in the sky, I'm not too sure about this one. But when it comes to unexplained sightings, it doesn't stop there.
Yeah, this is trippy. I would freak out.
In this next video posted to Twitter, a person notices what appears to be a metallic object that seems to be hiding within the clouds. Check this out. Now, being that there's very little information on this video, it could just be the top of a building that was visible through the clouds. However, if this were to be the case, the plane would be flying low, and a city would be visible in the horizon, which is not the case.
Light on top of it.
So whatever this thing is, it might just be that this person captured some sort of unknown object that was hiding in the clouds. Strange, isn't it? But it doesn't stop there. In a video recently uploaded by Astro Nature on TikTok, we can see a couple of friends playing volleyball in Argentina. The video was originally recorded in slow motion, and in it, we can see what appears to be a metallic object crossing the sky at an amazing speed.
Whoa.
Now, even though at first I thought this could be a bird or something like that, in the video we can clearly see that it disappears behind one of the mountains. So whatever this thing is, this is possibly the real deal. But I want to know your take. Have you ever seen anything like this? And do you think that these objects possibly come from within our oceans? What's your take? In the 17th century, King Louis XIV transformed Paris into the center of the fashion world by promoting luxury industries, textiles, and accessories. At the time, this ended up boosting the country's economy and establishing Paris as the epicenter of style and innovation, setting the stage for future icons like Coco Chanel, Christian Dior, and many others. Fast forward to today, and Paris continues to be a cultural phenomenon that's celebrated as a realm of artistry and glamour. And it was while walking the beautiful streets of Paris that a woman noticed something really strange and baffling about one of the mannequins at a store.
Okay, people, tell me something. So this is a store in Paris. This is a man's store in Paris. And this is a mannequin that they say, this boy look like somebody bomb. Look at his hand. His hands is as real as mine. If anybody have this guy missing, please.
The mannequin looked exactly like Christopher G, a supermodel that had supposedly gone missing a couple of months prior. Not only that, it looked too real to be a mannequin. And at the time, this led several people all over the internet into a spiral of thoughts that ended up throwing the fashion world into the center of several strange and bizarre controversies. And just recently, it happened again.
I'm so scared right now. So I'm minding my business, right? Fuck like this. Y'all hear that? What the is that?
Just a couple of weeks ago, an internet account by the name of Rhea uploaded a video of what appears to be a mysterious object that she noticed embedded in her overalls. Now the thing is, she bought the overalls from a fashion brand that is famous for their e-commerce platform that sells at a suspiciously low price.
Y'all hear that?
Weird.
After noticing this solid object that shouldn't be there, she does what anyone would do, and she cuts the overall open to find out what it is. And what she found left her and the entire internet completely creeped out.
It's like a tracker or something?
What is this? What? I'm gonna have an anxiety attack, bro. What the? What is this?
Not knowing what it is that she's looking at, she does a quick search and finds out that this is a chip-below tracker that was hidden inside her clothes. Now completely freaked out, she does what most people would do and she files a police report.
Here's what happened. This very much was real. At the end of the video, I'm gonna put a little video of me after finding out it was a tracker. And a picture of the case I opened for it. I'm scared right now, bro.
Now here's the thing about the chip-below tracker. It's a small Bluetooth device that helps locate items like keys, wallets, or even pets and people through a smartphone app. It can also ring the tracker like she did in the video, or show its location on a map through a smartphone. In other words, this could be a very handy tool for a stalker, and being that the chip-below tracker is more expensive than the overall itself, I highly doubt it that the company inserted the tracker into the overall to track stolen items. There's possibly some other sinister explanation to what's going on here. But the more I research this topic, the deeper the rabbit hole goes.
So I'm making these cute little elves for like all my neighbors for Christmas, putting their names on it, whatever. And I'm ripping the tags off, right? Because all the tags are on the outside. And I go up here and I feel something, like a piece of paper in it. So I'm like, oh, maybe they forgot to like sew the tag on the outside. But all the tags are on the butt. But anyway. So I go like that, right, to see. And there's writing on the inside. So I cut him open. There's all of his stuffing. And this comes out of a hat. It's written on the back of this. Now I translated this. It said something about noodles. I don't know. But I have no idea what this says.
There are countless videos of people who bought products from this brand and ended up finding hidden notes and things of sort inside of their products.
Okay, so I just ordered from...
Fuzzies on my fingers.
Oh my god. And this one's normal.
In most of these videos, people will find what they believe to be a hidden message that says, "Need your help." And even though some believe that this is just a simple mistake, there are also other types of hidden messages that were found. There's even one video where a girl found a live scorpion inside one of her packages.
What the hell?
Could it be that this is all just a big coincidence? Or is there something far more sinister going on here? What's your take? Now, I don't know if you know about this, but millions of years ago, higher oxygen levels in Earth's atmosphere allowed plants and animals to grow far larger than they do today. And because of that, dragonflies look like this. Scary, isn't it? They were way bigger. With time, Earth's atmosphere changed and everything became the way it is now, a bit smaller. However, there are traces of this past that linger in very strange ways. And if we dig deeper, we'll find bits and pieces of breadcrumbs that leads us to a very bizarre rabbit hole.
What else would it be? The Stegosaurus.
It all starts in Cambodia in the Tay Prom Temple, where ancient carvings estimated to be over 800 years old depict what some believe to be a Stegosaurus.
And here's a set of carvings that you can see. And the most amazing one is that one. Do you think Stegosauruses were still alive in this jungle in the 900s?
Weird, isn't it?
They only
Being
really
that it
carved
was
what they
William Buckland who
saw.
confirmed the existence of dinosaurs and first wrote about it in the 1800s. Almost 1,000 years later, after this dinosaur was carved in the Tay Prom Temple. In the Middle Ages, artists like Hans Holbein included strange, dragon-like creatures in their
hidden.
works. And in Peter Bruegel's 16th century paintings, we can
from us.
spot what looks like two dinosaurs in the background. And even though some believe that these are just camels, it doesn't quite look
No,
like
those
a
aren't
camel, does
camels.
it? But this mystery goes deeper. Several native tribes and ancient texts recount legends of giants and massive creatures.
Lo más peculiar de Tala es de la época prehispánica una leyenda hermosísima que se conoce con el nombre de los gigantes de Tala. A los conquistadores cuando llegaron, sorpresivamente encontraron que Tala estaba derruida. Era una población destruida por los gigantes que vinieron del poniente y sur.
That also happens with maps. So could it all be just a coincidence, a bad time story, or is there something about our past that remains somewhat hidden?
Es un hueso. Es un hueso enorme.
In July 2023, a man that goes by the name of Sam was hiking somewhere in Mexico. It was a beautiful and sunny day, and all of a sudden he came across something that would leave the entire internet scratching their heads. This is what he found.
Acabo de ver algo ahí que me parece como un tronco. Vamos a ver qué es. Ah, no manches. Esto es un hueso. Es un hueso. Miren esto. Wow. Es un hueso. Es un hueso. Es un hueso enorme. Aquí en el monte, miren. No sé qué tantos metros me dirá, pero es un hueso. Llega hasta acá. Y hasta acá. Acá está otro.
What looks like a giant bone can be clearly seen in the video, and after posting it to TikTok and other social medias, it immediately went viral. While some believe that this could be the rib bone of a mammoth or even a bronchosaurus, others stated that this is just a log, which it could be, but it doesn't quite look like one. There are also people who believe this is from something else, like for instance, a giant. Now I did some quick research to find out if this could be from a mammoth, and apparently it's too big for that. This, for instance, is a massive mammoth rib found in Florida by Dig Dive Discover, and as you can see, it's way smaller than the one found by Sam. So whatever this thing is, it's either from a bronchosaurus or something else entirely. In another video recently posted by Maru77, we can see what looks like giant footprints that were found somewhere in the mountains of Turkmenistan.
What the hell? What kind of freaking footprints are those?
Now, whatever it is that left these footprints, there are a couple of things that caught loads of people's attention. One of them is the fact that it seems as if the tracks appear out of nowhere, as if the creature was flying before it landed in this specific spot.
Maybe it jumped.
Another thing that caught loads of attention is the fact that most people seem to agree that they don't appear to be that old, even though the tracks could be from thousands, maybe millions of years ago. And this brings us to a very important question. Could it be that some of these unknown and massive creatures still roam the earth today?
I don't know what the hell that is over there.
Not Jim. Let's go.
Just a couple of weeks ago, on November 4th, a couple was kayaking on a lake in the region of Goya, Argentina. It was a beautiful day and they had been enjoying every bit of
like in Utah and stuff.
This is until this happens. Check this out.
I keep trying to remember one of the cities I went to in Mexico where there was a giant sighting. I was hoping to see one, but I was too busy kayaking and running my legs off. What was that?
What appears to be a massive creature that's moving erratically through the water can be seen striking their kayak and leaving the entire group creeped out. At this particular moment, they stop and try to catch this creature on camera to find out what it is.
Yeah, I would be out of there. Why don't you jump down there and check it out?
Una morena grande puede ser, ¿no? No. Mira lo que es. Tirate, tirate. Está entiendo eso. Tiro.
Yo siento mucho olor a flor.
Estúpida.
Mira, mira, ahora quedó. Mira.
Great.
Whatever this thing is, it's massive, and at the time it left the group and the entire internet completely baffled. Some believe that this could be a manatee or a big fish. The only problem is there are no manatees in this region of Argentina. And I don't think that this is just a big fish, being that it almost overturned the kayak with certain ease. So this has to be something else, something possibly massive. But what? But when it comes to these types of encounters, it doesn't stop there.
Okay, so I can't stand outside. The wind is blowing terribly, but there's something on that mountain.
In January 2024, a woman that goes by the name of Odds King 2 spotted something really strange while looking out her window somewhere in Cape Town, South Africa. After seeing what at first looks like a giant person on top of Devil's Peak, she steps outside to record this massive creature. And this is what she caught on camera.
So I can't stand outside. The wind is blowing terribly, but there's something on that mountain. The other night we sat outside and it was there. And I said to my son, there's a giant on the mountain. So he said, no, Mommy, that's a tree. So I said, okay, it's fine. I thought it was a tree. Then the next day it wasn't there. And for a few days it wasn't there. And now all of a sudden it's back there. So I don't know what that is, but my phone, I don't have a decent phone to zoom any further in. So, yeah, that's what I saw. That's what I'm seeing. I'm seeing that now, but I really don't know what it is.
Odds King captures what appears to be the figure of a giant person on top of Devil's Peak. And at first, I thought it could be a tree, which is the most logical explanation. However, the next day, it's no longer there.
I posted one of something standing there on the mountain, or I don't know what it was. But people in the comments want to know why am I not doing one when it's not there. I can't just put one when it's there, but not doing one when it's not there. So I'm just showing you today that it's not there. We can even zoom out a little bit, and you can see it's not there.
Whatever this thing is, it seems it's no longer there. Strange, isn't it? But then a couple of weeks later, it shows up again. Now, being that Odds King 2 is quite far away from the mountain, I would say that this thing has to be massive in size. And after posting these videos to the internet, it caught a lot of attention. While some believe that this is possibly just a tree, and that on that second day when this thing wasn't there, she was recording from a different angle, others think that there's something really strange about it. Now, after using Photoshop to overlap both videos, I found out that she's actually looking at the same place, and that whatever this thing is, it did indeed disappear for a while. But because it wasn't moving at all and the quality of the zoom in isn't exactly that good, it's quite difficult to affirm that this is a giant creature or anything like that. But things are a bit different in this next video, recorded by Leguchi Boy in Victorville, California. Check this out.
Victorville, California.
Está grande. Sobrepasa los arbustos. Si no es una persona. No, porque mira, ahí se ve pequeña en la grabación, pero de lejos se ve muy grande. Mira, va corriendo. Y sí se mira como que fuera, pero no. Si te fijas la distancia que es y dónde le quedan los arbustos, sobrepasa. Y una persona no sobrepasa los arbustos. Mira. Se ve grande y está parado junto a los arbustos, pero se ve más grande. ¿Será un gigante?
While driving by Victorville, California on a sunny day, Leguchi Boy spots what at first looks like a person running on top of a mountain. This is when he notices that there's something odd. It seems as if the person is too tall to be a regular human being. Now, what makes all of this very strange is that just a couple of weeks after uploading this video, Leguchi Boy's account got deleted from TikTok for some mysterious reason. While some agree that this is most likely a person running on top of a mountain, and it could be, others state that because of the person's size in comparison to the bushes and the speed at which it's running, it could be someone very tall or even possibly a giant. Now, this would not be the first time something like this is caught on camera. For the past few years, several people have been recording what appears to be giant humanoid figures in different kinds of situations.
I bet they'd like that.
Yo veo un gigante ahí arriba. ¿Qué será?
¿O no será un gigante? Mira.
¿Es un tanto, verdad? Sí.
¿Puedes grabar esto, güey? Porque mi cámara no lo...
Not only that, spread throughout the world, you'll find several mysterious footprints that suggest the giants could have existed somewhere in the distant past.
And this footprint is located in just not far away from a little town called Amsterdam, close to the border of Swaziland in South Africa.
But I want to know your thoughts. What do you think is really going on here? And do you think that there's a chance that there are still massive creatures that we have absolutely no knowledge of still roaming the planet?
Hey, big storm last night, Destin, Florida. These sharks' teeth are everywhere.
Have you ever felt as if you went to sleep one day and woke up the next inside of a parallel universe? Things look the same, but it's like there's something different about it and you don't know exactly what it is. Well, since 2011, thousands of people have been talking about feeling something like this. And one of the phenomena that loads of people usually talk about is the Mandela effect. But besides the Mandela effect, there are other similar phenomena that appear to be happening more often.
This video is insane. My partner just sent it to me.
In Bogota, Colombia, for instance, a man was able to capture what appears to be a floating tree. The video was uploaded by Mia Zoe Healing on TikTok, and obviously it caught a lot of attention. Even though some people state that the tree is probably hanging from a wire, the question is, how did it get there in the first place? But when it comes to waking up, feeling as if you're in a different universe, it doesn't stop there. Just a couple of months ago, a woman who lives in Florida arrived at a house she was used to cleaning every week. Everything looked as it should, until something bizarre caught her attention. This is what happened.
Les cuento que encontré una falla en la matriz. Yo siempre vengo aquí a limpiar una casa y pues esta mesita que ustedes ven aquí, yo la limpio, ¿no? Siempre, y siempre abro este cajón. Y aquí en este cajón siempre ha habido como una navaja, ¿ya? Una navaja grande, muy bonita. Y resulta que ahora voy a limpiar y voy a abrir la cajuelita esta y no abre. Y resulta que aquí nunca ha habido cajón. Aquí nunca ha habido gaveta. ¿Ah? ¿Cómo le digo? Esto es ficticio. Esto es ficticio. Este cajón nunca ha abierto. Mire, acá abajo nunca ha tenido gaveta.
Completely confused by what she was seeing, she decides to make a video about the drawer that never existed. At the time she was recording this, she must have felt as if she was living inside of a parallel dimension or something like that. And I can only imagine the feeling that it must be for someone to witness something like this. But this isn't the first time something like this happens.
No, but why am I watching a TV show and realizing the people in the TV show live in my apartment unit?
Just recently, an internet profile by the name of Staff Dag noticed something really strange while watching a TV show that she had been following for quite a while. Upon noticing a huge resemblance from the show's apartment to hers, she slowly realizes that there's some sort of glitch going on. This is when she decides to make a video about it, and this is what she caught on camera.
Why am I watching a TV show and realizing the people in the TV show live in my apartment unit? Okay, this is the apartment. Do we see that electric box and that sticker? What? I mean, that's their bathroom? That's my bathroom. Okay, that's their kitchen. Girl. I'm sorry. Don't tell me we don't live in the Truman Show. I mean, what? There's how many apartments in New York? This is a glitch. There's actually a glitch happening in the Matrix right now.
It's not like the apartment in the show and hers were a bit different. It was the same apartment. And at this particular moment, Staff was freaking out. Several different possibilities of glitches, simulation, and parallel dimensions were passing through her mind. But then she uploaded the video to TikTok and it caught so much attention that this happens.
Okay, so the show I was watching was Couples Therapy on Showtime, and I have since been contacted by a producer on the show who confirmed that they were shooting in my building and that it likely was my apartment because of the sticker on the break box, which is the same in the show. So also everyone commenting being like, oh my god, why aren't you freaking out, like they're shooting when you're not there? Like, no, they were former tenants, right?
So it seems that the TV producers called her and told her that they were actually recording in that same building a year prior. However, there are a few things that are still very strange. The stickers and other details in her apartment and on the show are the same. So this is either one of the biggest coincidences ever, or there's something else going on here. But when it comes to this type of phenomena, it doesn't stop there. In a video recently posted by Lin Jung on TikTok, we can see a man supposedly use superhuman powers to stop a truck from falling from a cliff. What's really interesting about this video is that in the end of it, we can easily notice how most people seem to be completely baffled by the incredible feat that the man just accomplished. After being posted to TikTok, there were many people trying to understand how exactly this happened. This is either a huge coincidence and the trucker was accelerating and was able to get out of there, or there's something else going on here. Now, one thing that I've noticed after replaying the video a few times is that it seems that when the man reaches the truck, you can see him leaving huge footprints behind. Now, if this is the case, it could just be that the man was using some sort of cheap power to achieve this superhuman feat. In a video recently posted by Junkyard Realities, a woman explores a junkyard with a ragged Mazda where a dog and its owner recently died. Upon close inspection, she captures something chilling. Check this out.
So I was standing outside this Mazda and I was like, oh, I should video record it.
Jeez.
You know, before I inventory it. So
that was a bad wreck
so
for
I can do my
sure.
research later and then tell you guys a story.
Holy crap.
So I did just that. And when I video recorded it, come in. We're going to take a look. This crash involved a dog. There's a dog right there. Do you guys see that?
Where?
Go back. Look again.
Did you see that? While recording the inside of the car, she accidentally captures a reflection. And in this reflection, we can clearly see what looks like a dog. This is either a huge coincidence, or it's that sort of thing that you feel as if it's a hidden message from the universe that was accidentally caught on camera. And while some people think that this is possibly the dog's ghost, others agree that this is either a glitch in the simulation or just a reflection. But I want to know your take. Have you ever woke up feeling as if you were in a different universe? And what do you think about these bizarre glitches? Are they just coincidences, or is there something else going on here? Located in eastern Colombia, there is the small town of Facatativá. The city is widely known for its rich archaeological heritage and beautiful landscapes. Most of the time, it's a peaceful escape to enjoy nature due to its quiet atmosphere. However, just a few months ago, Facatativá became the center of attention after a chilling phenomenon took place on one hot summer night. It all starts with Sarah Vargas recording a video for her TikTok account at her dad's apartment. As she chatted casually about her day, something unbelievable takes place. And this is what she caught on camera.
Which hand? This one. I was gonna open that hand anyway. What time is it? 57. But just let me know when you're done, and then I'm gonna show you guys something on what it takes. But I knew that you loved me, so I already hooked your dad up with a bunch of Three Musketeers. So we got about 5 more minutes.
The disturbing screams late at night caught the attention of most neighbors, who called the police immediately. But what at first looked like a police situation turns out to be an exorcism that was taking place, and this is what happens next.
That lady's possessed. Everybody thought he was beating her.
Not knowing exactly how to proceed, the police ask for a rosary and call a Catholic nun to help with the exorcism. According to Sarah, the disturbing screams and this entire situation endured for the entire night. She explains that it all started at her neighbor's house when the two girls that lived there decided to play Ouija board. This is when all of a sudden one of them starts to vomit a black substance. What happened next is what you just saw in this video, and to this day no one knows exactly how things played out. What I do know, however, is that they'll probably never be playing with the Ouija board again. But when it comes to paranormal encounters like this one, there's more. The year was 2020 and it was almost New Year's Eve. Peter and his brother had been waiting for their parents to come back from the store late at night. This is when all of a sudden Peter starts feeling as if they're not all alone. And this is what happens.
Estamos aquí en la casa de mi bisabuela, se fue la... ¿Qué es eso? Se fue la luz. Esta es la casita, porque... Y mi mamá...